This is the War Room Roundtable podcast, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant businessmen and women on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on the road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their successes into your life and business. The War Room Roundtable is brought to you by your hosts, Jason Miller, CEO of Strategic Advisor Board, and Phillip Lanos, CEO of Own the Rhythm, and former podcast host for Entrepreneur and Inc. magazine. Welcome to the War Room. It's really nice to have you here, John. It's not often we get to talk to somebody who can help point out the blind spots in people's operations, or because you are literally at the crux of getting shit done for people, you know, and a lot of people who are leading companies, running companies, they tend to delegate things and then wonder why they're not getting done. And there's probably something missing there and they're not clear on that. We're going to be able to talk about all that. So if someone's driving right now, listening to this, and you have questions and you're wondering, oh, why isn't shit getting done in my company? What's going on? We're about to dive into that. And that's why I'm happy to have you on. And I know Jason is too.
Well, thank you. I'm excited and I'm glad to be here and excited for the discussion.
So it's great to have you. We've chewed some of the same dirt at Fort Bragg, which is pretty cool, right? I don't get that often, so I just have to mention that we know a lot of the same people. We're in the same circles, and just glad to have you here, brother. Always good to have another brother on. That's
awesome.
Sure.
Well, thanks. And likely, I feel much more comfortable. I said, I got a known entity, a brother online. I said, I'm good. I said, I'm ready.
Yeah, man. Look, I never went through the service. I never went through the training. So I can only imagine the level of bond that one builds in having to go through that. And so with that said, I do believe that relationships are at the crux of getting things done. But I'm gonna delegate it to you to help clarify whether that's true or not. So while I usually ask about other things, I want to know, when was the first time in your professional experience you saw that there is an importance in having someone be the point, the lead on getting things done that isn't necessarily the top leader, let's say, because they're so far removed usually from operations? When was the first time you realized the exact power and importance, responsibility of your position?
Oh, from the very beginning, I was a young lieutenant, brand new. And it was, we talk about formal and informal leaderships. It's that, the person wasn't even in charge, but they knew that it was that relationship. We kind of talked on it a little bit, that trust. You develop that trust in someone. It just gels itself into making things happen, into getting stuff done. Is that, I'm listening to him. I trust him. He's telling me something that I've got to do to whatever the mission is, whatever it is we're doing. And it really, you have that trust in that person, and it just gelled. And I learned that very early on. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name now. It's been quite a few years, but I'll never forget. And we just arrived, right in basic training, and he was like, "Hey, we're going to do this and this," and I was like, "Okay, hey, all right." It was, it just gelled. It's hard to explain, but really that trust and communication piece.
Got it. So one of the first couple of qualities you realized that were going to be important moving forward is trust. So now, when you were conducting the completion of a project, right, from its inception all the way to the end of it all, and let's say it was your first big project, what was that like for you, having to work with leadership? Were just because they trusted you, were they clear? Did you need clarity, but you didn't know what to ask in the beginning? What was that dynamic like?
That's a great point. And that's exactly what happened is, I learned very early on is that leaders tend to assume that, you're in the position, so you should know. And they give guidance which they believe is very clear, but in fact it's either garbled or not really understood. And I found, as I got older, I said, hey, that reach back, that touch back to saying, do you really understand what I'm telling you? Do you, we use feedback and, asking probing questions, but I found a lot of leaders don't do that. They just assume, and again, it's a lot of things going on. They're very busy and they're very, engaged in other things and multiple things, that it's sometimes they give that direction, but it's not as clear as they think in their mind. And so that feedback to kind of go again, what did I just ask you? What did I just tell you to do? Do you understand? And I found when I was younger, nobody did that. And I had to go back, and there was many instances when I was real young that I was a little intimidated, a little afraid. So you kind of muddied it through, did your best. And, when you came close to the project completion, it's like, well, that's not what I wanted. This is completely diametrically opposite of what I wanted. And if the leader had just clearly given out guidance beforehand and really understood, we wouldn't have went down that rabbit hole. And it's interesting to see, and multiple times I've found I kind of talk to people and head off the pass and kind of say, hey, I don't think that person knows what it is you want them to do. We clearly, and so we're both on, synchronized on the same sheet of music, we call it. Are you still really on the same sheet of music? And oftentimes they're not, even though in their mind they think they were. But when you get down to the end, it's you had this scope in mind of what you wanted, but you didn't translate that into the recipient's mind. I had a boss that kind of said, you're basically taking a picture out of your head and trying to put it in that person's head and making sure that they're synchronized. And often I found that there's a disconnect, and then it causes problems.
Now, when was the last time you were part of a project that went south and you actually had to step in and educate a leader on how and why this failed?
Very, very recently, and so I had subordinates that had subordinates that, led projects. And so having to go, I don't really know how to categorize it. Is it experience? Is it just, you have this understanding? But you kind of can ask questions. I'm a question asker. I'll ask questions. What is the purpose? What is the goal? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And if the person leading the project can't answer that, then there's obviously a disconnect, because I'll know and I'll give feedback and saying, hey, here's what problem we're trying to solve. This is what, the focus of what we're trying to do. What is your input, and get feedback. Okay, you got it. But then when they pass it on to, to actually execute that project, it wasn't very well articulated. And so just going down and making sure, hey, do you really, what is the purpose of why are we doing this? It almost lends itself to the common little the joke about if you say something to one person in one and then you pass it down, by the end it comes, it's a completely different. And there's a lot of truth to that. So you have to make sure, and that feedback loop, and making sure that everybody understands what it is we're trying to do. And and there's the projects run the gamut. I mean, they're all, there's multiple projects, but they all have the same issues, the same, problem sets, and that come back all the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a story of one of your favorite projects that you were a part of?
Oh yeah, man, there's so many. One of my favorites was, we had to put together a new analysis for formations, readiness of units, organizations to deploy. And the Army, the normal assessment is what they call the unit status report. I don't want to go and bore you on the problem, but it was a really kind of a lockstep, personnel, training, readiness, and supply status that, you were good in those areas, then, you were ready. But in the Army Reserve and the National Guard, and there's other organizations, there's other aspects of readiness that weren't being depicted. So my boss came and said, hey, I've got to be able to articulate to the senior leadership of the Army and to the National Command Authority of our true readiness, of how we can, if you called us up, how long it would take us to get out the door. The current model wasn't right. We couldn't really tell you. So we, pulled in a team, from personnel, from training, from supply, from finance, because you got to have money, and basically pulling that in. And what I truly enjoyed was the collaboration and the team of experts. They're phenomenal people, and what I really did enjoy is the conversation and defining the problem with them, laying out what we needed to do, and then their feedback and what they provided was far more than what I was, that when we had anticipated. And they had other ideas, and it was almost like a synergistic, effect. And they came up, and we came up with a whole new model that expanded even from our initial what we thought it was going to be. And we to make a long story short, we laid out the model, we briefed it up, got it all approved, and it's in place. And when they were like, hey, we really changed the conversation at the DoD level for the reserve components in deploying. And so that was just dealing with the professionals, and that communication and the collaboration was one of my most favorite projects.
I see. Now,
Yeah.
when you were training and in service, did you and Jason ever cross paths at all?
I don't know. I know we've chewed the same dirt. I think he left either right before I got there, or I believe that was what happened.
Yeah, I think we just missed each other in that.
Oh wow!
I was retiring when you were kind of coming in there.
Yep.
And but pretty cool stuff. And
it's a small world.
It is a small world. It's a super, super small world. And the cool thing that I really like about or not, the experience you get from projects like that are unreplaceable, right? I mean, very few people ever get the opportunity to sit at that level of project management and manage a team of that size, right? It's a very unusual experience. And even in the corporate space, projects aren't that big, right? Yeah. So even in the big corporations, look at Oracle, look at any of these companies, right? They compartmentalize so much into these small teams. Apple does it. I know my neighbor's one of the top coders in Apple, and they're so compartmentalized that they don't even know what they're working on, right? You mentioned feedback loop, and I see this constantly with, our clients that we work with, is that feedback loop. And when you bring a project manager in, and they give their mission, vision, scope, all these things, right? But what happens is, and what I always like to do, and I've done it for years, and I've always said, so what you're asking me to do is, right? Yep. Because then it has to go through their brain again. I used to do this to junior officers, no offense. Yep. But
none taken. We do it.
So I used to say, hey, sir, so what you're asking us to do is this. Are you sure? Are you sure that's what you want us to do? And I'd still do it today to like senior CEOs that we work with. Are you sure that's what you want to do? And then the gears turn. They're like, well, wait a minute. No, it's not. So then you don't get through that feedback loop. And at the end, they don't go, that's not what I wanted. Well, that's what you said. So there's a lot of ways to during that process to re-solidify those things in the process.
That's a great, and it's not only, the feedback loop from, say the senior leader to the project manager, but it's all the way down through the line to almost to the user level. And great example I can think of was, and I'm not going to name names, but we had a large project to push down a new IT software down all the way down through the commands, all the way down to the user level. And that non-compliance model, can't, won't, don't know. It's never really, they won't. Those that's a very small fraction. It's really they generally don't know. And what the guidance was coming out wasn't real clear. And so we had organizations that really, we don't know what we're supposed to do, but the project was out there that was getting pushed, and that communication piece wasn't very well put together. And so we had to go back and say, hey, wait a minute, let's really think about from the user level, we have this technical, language, but does the user level, does that customer know that language? And then they know what you're talking about in order to execute. We had that was again, part of my input was that, hey, I'm not a technical expert, but I know how, if I'm reading this, I don't know what you're trying to tell me to do. And so we had to go back to and let them know, hey, this is what you're supposed to, we have to redo kind of that communications package to, the customer, the user level. So that was just, again, that feedback loop is critically important.
Yeah, see, that's what I want to dive into. So let's talk about recalibrating or restructuring, redesigning a communication package when trying to get a new initiative out across an entire organization. What are some rules of thumb that are going to be invaluable for people to walk away with from this conversation?
Again, always the number one rule, and like I said, is using the customer in mind, that end user in mind. We often, I've found it where we have technical people who are phenomenal. They're brilliant, but they speak a certain language. They speak in technical, and they know what what the technical details are, but that translation into regular people, like the user, sometimes doesn't translate. And you can probably see it on like in my son's toys. You get some of these instructions, you're like, I can't even read this thing, I don't even know what it's telling me to do. And it's that translation piece. And so you have an unsatisfied customer because we didn't translate we have the great product, we didn't translate to the end user of what it is they're supposed to do, or what this is supposed to, what it means to them. And so that I would, start from, that first point is the communication package really needs to be put in, we use that term, keep it simple, stupid, kids, but, really kind of at that level is really keep it at the most simplistic level as possible for the customer and their ability to absorb what it is your product or project, an example.
Is it better to use a digital tool or sort of bricks and mortar like paper and pencil and files to really get projects done in this day and age when everyone's inundated by so much technology?
That's a great question, and I guess it really depends. And it really depends on personally for me, I like the electronic tools. I prefer them. But I found on some senior leaders that they're still using the pen and paper. And so that translation, when you're doing a brainstorming session, computers aren't really great for that, but a brewer is. So it really depends. And so for each situation, you really got to use what works and what, your team wants, teamwork, the team that you're working with, what works best for them, and really understanding their, what works best for them, their needs.
So if you had the chance to, let's say that we're in a room of 100 top executives, entrepreneurs, and they're all sort of to some degree struggling with getting their projects to be efficient and to run up to completion. And while I know you can't address each one on a case by case basis, but if you could point them to certain pillars that they need to know, pillar 1, 2, 3, 4, to go in and check. Like, while I can't personally investigate it for you, here's how you would run an investigation to identify maybe where there's a crack in your operation, in your project. Could you speak to that?
Sure. Again, the first pillar is, again, that communication, and ask questions. And don't ask the question to the senior person. Go to that worker on the floor, the more junior, and ask them the question. What is the purpose? What are we doing? What problem are we trying to solve? And if on a good team that has good communication, good integration, synchronization, they'll be able to tell you, hey, what we're doing today is da 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 da. And then you'll understand. But if you ask that question and they give you the blank, I don't know. Well, then that, hey, I probably should go ask some more questions. In my mind, especially a senior, executive, they're really there to ask questions, provide that guidance and give direction, and to really, and one way we find out if that's truly being followed is to ask those questions. Because it lends itself into prioritization. It lends itself into, hey, the synchronization piece that's critical, especially amongst larger projects. You've got a lot of different things going on. If the individual, legs that you've got working in those projects don't know what the other person's doing, then we may, especially at the senior level, not at the user level or junior level, but at that senior level, they probably should know, hey, I'm doing this because this next leg is waiting on me to complete the next phase, and really understanding that. I found a lot of challenges in companies that do have problems, that they don't do that, and or they come and they don't do that synchronization or that integration piece, and then when they come down to do their towards the end of the project, kind of like the same thing I said for communication, they're like, hey, wait, that's not, well, I didn't know we were supposed to do this. I didn't know this is, and you kind of have, a very bad day, like we like to call it. It's a significant emotional event, as Jason, as I'm sure, is very familiar with that.
Got it. So at the end of the day, well, if you were in that room, you would say, when you're considering the idea of stakeholders in a project or some kind of initiative, consider even the lowest worker bee, if you will.
Yes.
For lack of a better term, a huge stakeholder in the actual project, and not the other way around.
Absolutely, is because, at the end of the, in multiple projects, it's that, like in your term, your worker bee, they're the essential part. They're the ones making the money, and we call it in terms of making money. They're the ones really making the money. The overhead, us managers, we're responsible for synchronization, providing guidance, and making sure that we communicate what's supposed to happen. But the end result is that worker bee. If that worker bee isn't clear, then we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And again, that's why I say ask those probing questions, and make sure that they really understand, especially through the line, that they know what you're trying to get at, what's your purpose, what your goal is, and it'll solve a lot of problems.
And now, before I dive into the grand finale and the last couple of items of business, I want to give Jason the floor, see if he's got any questions or curiosities.
Yeah, well, to sum up a really important key point of this whole conversation is a piece that you mentioned before, and that is end user. And oftentimes that just, nobody thinks of that, right? Because everybody's caught in their little piece and compartmentalized chunk and this, that, and the other. And then we roll this out and everybody goes, huh?
Yep.
So like you said, that one rule, or those couple of rules, rule one, always keep the end user in mind. rule 2, remember rule 1. Right. So, because it's really important, and it gets lost in translation a lot of times. And it's I've seen it in big companies, I've seen it in the military, all over, where there's this grand vision of something, but then we don't even get input from the people that are supposed to use it. It's like, here, put this brand new rucksack on that we know nothing about.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Or here's this new piece of equipment. The batteries only weigh 50 pounds a piece, but here, carry it. Right. So it's like, we just can't forget those things. And that's an important thing to highlight about what you talked about there.
Understood. Okay. So now I want to check in and make sure if you're prepared for the grand finale, John, which is if you could have invited anybody, dead or alive, to this conversation today to contribute or just listen, who would you have invited here today and why?
So I thought about that, and I had, and the one person comes to my mind, and which I think many people are going to be like, huh, really? And I got to say, Teddy Roosevelt. There's a couple reasons. Number one, just his independent streak, his ability to think more strategically. He was business oriented, notwithstanding the trust budget, but more business oriented on ethical business. And I really liked, I really appreciated his ability to manage, number one, provide clear guidance, manage his teams, and follow up and accomplish great things. And I just always was fascinated by him and reading, his story, and his ability to bring together coalitions and teams together to accomplish great things. And that's, I think that would be a very interesting conversation to have with him.
For sure. I can only imagine what it would have been like to have him here. And if you have that as an ideal and an inspiration, I can only imagine the level of integrity that you bring to the work that you're doing and how you aspire to that. That says a lot about the kind of work that you want to do and the kind of things you want to accomplish. So thank you for opening up about that. Those are my closing thoughts, Jason.
Well, I always like to end with, we have 168 hours in a week, and you chose to spend 30 minutes with us today. Thanks for being here. It's appreciated. We can replace cars, money, all these things, but the one thing we can't replace is time. So time is money. Money loves speed, and speed loves money. So thanks for taking the time to be here and, really educate our audience and drop some good nuggets on the audience. I think it was some things came out of this conversation that could be some really good aha moments. So just appreciate you being here, my friend.
Well, thank you. And thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed this and the discussion. So thank you. It's great seeing you, John.
Yeah. It was great meeting you, man.
Awesome. Cheers, brother.
Thanks for listening to the War Room Roundtable with your hosts, Jason Miller and Phillip Lanos. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and always remember, if you can dream it and believe it, then you can go achieve it. We'll see you in the next episode.